Hi, I'm Chris. I'm founder of a company called Polything, which is a marketing consultancy based in London. And today, as you know, we'll be talking about Facebook ads. So I've just kind of put together a bit of agenda for today. And I guess my main goal for today is to get you to a point where you understand enough background behind social networks and the ad platform to successfully set up your own campaign, but also to be able to use targeting within the platform, because I think that's the kind of the main thing that most people get wrong. So I'll just go into a bit more of an intro about myself, then we'll cover fundamentals about social media platforms and also ad platforms as well. And there's a couple of exercises which hopefully you guys will find useful. And then finally, we'll get to Q&A, as Alice mentioned earlier. So let's crack on. So just by way of more of an introduction, Polything is a marketing consultancy which helps direct-to-consumer businesses elevate their marketing. I come from a media background, so we use storytelling very heavily in the work that we do. And we use that power of storytelling to get cut through for clients. Previously, I was in media for around 20 years in marketing roles. I'm also a non-exec director of a small media business at the moment. I mentor on the Digital Boost platform as well as the Help to Grow program. And I'm a member of the ABM, Association of British Mentors. That always gets me. And I also mentor private clients. Fundamentals of social platforms. Hopefully you'll know some of the background behind this, but maybe the way I explain it will give you more context in relation to ads and why it's a slightly different environment to say Google ads or display ads or any other type of performance ad. So the fundamentals. Social networks sprung up as network businesses, and as network businesses they enjoy economies of scale, but all network businesses are fundamentally premised on satisfying a consumer need of some sort, and for their longevity they need to repeatedly do this over and over again. So within Facebook and Meta largely, but also the other social networks like Snapchat and TikTok, the kind of equation goes something like this. So there's usually attention in the center of everything. Social networks engineer that experience to gain users' attention. So I don't think you probably appreciate the lengths they go to kind of engineer that experience to keep people on platform, but also to serve them the most, I guess, engaging content to keep them entertained. The longer the users spend on platform and the more regularly they return, the more successful that network is, and they tend to grow. So if anyone's been following TikTok, you'll kind of understand how they've taken market share from Facebook and others recently. And ultimately, they make money by commoditizing that user attention by serving advertising. So it's really in their interest to keep people on platform for as long as possible and to deliver advertising so that they can then generate more revenue. But there is a delicate balancing act to strike here, because obviously if they commoditize too heavily, then they annoy users and they disappear and they don't come back. And if they just promote organic content, then they can't commoditize enough to fund their business model. So it's quite a balancing act that they need to strike. So just moving on to Facebook and Meta specifically, we're now in a position where a quarter of the world are on Facebook every day, which is a staggering number. So it's 1.9 billion people. So it shouldn't be a surprise really that businesses are using Meta and its ecosystem to serve advertising and get new users, make sales. There's something in the region of 200 million businesses utilize Facebook, and 93% of all marketeers worldwide are on there. So it's a competitive place. So it's really important to understand that from the outset. You're going to be competing with large corporates as well as more localized competitors in your space. But ultimately, to succeed, there's two things you need to understand really well. One is the algorithm, and the second thing is the ad platform auction and how that operates. And to build successful campaigns, you've got to know both of these things pretty well. So let's talk about the algorithm. As you're probably aware that there's an algorithm at play in terms of what users see when they log on to these platforms, particularly Facebook. What you probably don't know is how that algorithm actually works. There's been multiple changes to the Facebook algorithm, probably about, I think, 70 odd since 2006 when it was introduced into newsfeed. But broadly, it works like this. So stage one is a user logging in. And when a user logs in, the algorithm will look at all the potential pieces of content that could be served to that person. It collates that. And then the second stage is it will look for signals within all of those posts. And those signals could be who posted that post. It could be when it was posted, so the age of that post. It could be how many times a person has interacted with that poster, and what time of day is it for the user that's consuming the content, and things like how fast is their internet. So there's a whole host of different factors that get mixed in and analyzed. The third step is predictions. So what the algorithm then does is it makes predictions based on all those factors of how likely a user is to interact with that piece of content. So that could be how likely are they to like it, comment on it, read it, watch it, vote on it. All those different actions are seen as positive actions within the platform. So really the algorithm is taking those actions as indicators of engagement within the platform. And the last part is scoring. So this is important because it essentially ranks every single piece of content based on the signals it's received and the predictions that are available to determine which order you will see posts as you log into the platform, with the higher scoring content obviously coming first and the lower scoring content being further down the feed. So this is important because when you're advertising, you're kind of interrupting that flow of content, and Facebook kind of engineer when those ad placements are put into the feed. But also the good thing to understand is if you can make your content act like organic content, then you will make savings on your ad budgets and you also get more engagement. So the second piece of the puzzle is the ad auction. And I think probably we all know that it's not like a traditional auction where the highest bidder wins an auction. In Facebook and Meta's world, it's determined instead by value. And value is comprised of three different elements. The first thing is the bid, which is the kind of traditional metric. But in this case, it's the maximum value that an advertiser is prepared to spend on a particular action. So that could be a like, it could be an engagement like a comment, it could be a click-through, it could be a landing page view, it could be a video view. The second bit is around estimated action rate. So what the algorithm, the auction algorithm will do is then look at the likelihood of a user undertaking that action. And that in part is based on their previous interactions. It's also based on the type of ad it is. And that will give an estimate of how likely it is that person is going to take the desired action on the ad platform. And the final measure is called ad quality. And this is a measure of how good an ad is perceived by Meta. In part, that's informed by user feedback, So if you've got someone that's hidden your ads or hidden your ad account, obviously that's going to have a detrimental effect. But also there are automated systems within the platform that look at things like ad quality, image quality or video quality, the amount of copy on images, and issues like that. And your ad will get a quality rank as well. And then finally, based on all three of these criteria, your ad will be best when it succeeds over other advertisers that are trying to reach the same person in the same session. So essentially it's the bid plus how likely it is they are going to undertake the action you want them to do, plus the quality of the ad itself. So it's important to know this, because the highest bid doesn't always win, and quite often it's not the highest bid that wins, it's the bid that is more engaging to a particular user. Also, the more you can make your ads act like organic content, the lower your costs will be ultimately. Relevancy is really, really important. So relevancy comes to play in terms of who you're targeting, but also is your content or your ad like the other content that that user engages with regularly. Estimated action rate is based on previous ad performance. So it's also important to know that, because when you first launch a campaign, you quite often find that ads don't perform. And quite often they go through a phase of what's termed as learning within the platform. And it takes time for that data to build up. And quite often you'll find that ads that initially don't perform that well can be your best ads. And the final lesson really is about driving users outside of Meta's ecosystem, because every time you do that, it's one less opportunity for Meta to retain that user on platform and therefore engage them more and therefore serve them more advertising. So you need to be mindful of that when you're using the ad platform, because it's going to cost you more money to drive users outside of the ecosystem. So the next bit is moving on to exercises. So I don't know whether any of you, all of you, have things called ideal customer profiles. So exercises. So what we'll do is we'll spend around 15 minutes looking at either an ideal customer profile and writing that up, or a pen portrait, and we'll go through these in a minute. Then we'll look at how we can translate that information into targeting options. I'll then show you the targeting options for the example that we've chosen, and then we'll go through any questions that you might have around this. So first things first, what is an IPC, or an ideal customer profile? So an ideal customer profile is defined from firm demographics. So this means that it's either environmental or behavioral attributes that you have derived from data. Second one is age. That's fairly self-explanatory. There are defined age breaks within Facebook. Gender, I think we're still limited to the kind of traditional gender selections in Facebook. I don't think they've got any other options at the moment. Language is an interesting one. I've done quite a lot of work for UK businesses where their primary market is overseas, and language can be a really helpful option there. And we'll come back to that when we look at Angelique again. Demographics. So that's any other demographics we can define. Interests. This is really, really the most powerful part about Facebook targeting. You can input pretty much any interest in there and you will get some sort of result. So I'd really suggest trying that out and getting as granular as you can around people's interests, because pretty much everything is on there. And the last one is behaviors. So that normally relates to how their behaviors are in terms of your own relationships with them. So have they been to your website? Have they connected with you? Are they a follower of yours? Have they engaged with you? That type of thing. And it's important to note that you can add these things as to include an audience, but you can also use them to exclude an audience. So, for example, if you were doing an acquisition campaign to purely new customers, you may want to exclude people that have previously bought from you. So you could do that within, if you're importing your CRM data into Facebook, you could exclude existing customers. Similarly, if you wanted to grow your Facebook page, you could exclude your existing Facebook followers. Similarly, you could do the same thing with Instagram as well. So those are the different targeting options. I'll show the example again just to give you a sort of sense of how that might look. So in this example with Angelique, her location is Luxembourg. I've kind of put it in quite a broad age range because it's a profile, so people are going to be either end of this age band. Gender's female, languages, because she's from Luxembourg, all three of these languages are. Second one is age, that's fairly self-explanatory. There are defined age breaks within Facebook. Gender, I think we're still limited to the kind of traditional gender selections in Facebook. I don't think they've got any other options at the moment. Language is an interesting one. I've done quite a lot of work for UK businesses where their primary market is overseas, and language can be a really helpful option there. And we'll come back to that when we look at Angelique again. Demographics, so that's any other demographics we can define. Interests, this is really the most powerful part about Facebook targeting. You can input pretty much any interest in there and you will get some sort of result. So I'd really suggest trying that out and getting as granular as you can around people's interests, because pretty much everything is on there. And the last one is behaviors. So that normally relates to how their behaviors are in terms of your own relationships with them. So have they been to your website? Have they connected with you? Are they a follower of yours? Have they engaged with you? That type of thing. And it's important to note that you can add these things as to include an audience, but you can also use them to exclude an audience. So, for example, if you were doing an acquisition campaign to purely new customers, you may want to exclude people that have previously bought from you. So you could do that within, if you're importing your CRM data into Facebook, you could exclude existing customers. Similarly, if you wanted to grow your Facebook page, you could exclude your existing Facebook followers. Similarly, you could do the same thing with Instagram as well. So those are the different targeting options. I'll show the example again just to give you a sort of sense of how that might look. So in this example with Angelique, her location is Luxembourg. I've kind of put it in quite a broad age range because it's a profile, so people are going to be either end of this age band. Gender's female, languages, because she's from Luxembourg, all three of these languages are still limited to the kind of traditional gender selections in Facebook. I don't think they've got any other options at the moment. Language is an interesting one. I've done quite a lot of work for UK businesses where their primary market is overseas, and language can be a really helpful option there. And we'll come back to that when we look at Angelique again. Demographics, so that's any other demographics we can define. Interests, this is really the most powerful part about Facebook targeting. You can input pretty much any interest in there and you will get some sort of result. So I'd really suggest trying that out and getting as granular as you can around people's interests, because pretty much everything is on there. And the last one is behaviors. So that normally relates to how their behaviors are in terms of your own relationships with them. It's still limited to the kind of traditional gender selections in Facebook. I don't think they've got any other options at the moment. Language is an interesting one. I've done quite a lot of work for UK businesses where their primary market is overseas, and language can be a really helpful option there. And we'll come back to that when we look at Angelique again. Demographics. So that's any other demographics we can define. Interests. This is really, really the most powerful part about Facebook targeting. You can input pretty much any interest in there and you will get some sort of result. So I'd really suggest trying that out and getting as granular as you can around people's interests, because pretty much everything is on there. And the last one is behaviors. So that normally relates to how their behaviors are in terms of your own relationships with them. So have they been to your website? Have they connected with you? Are they a follower of yours? Have they engaged with you? That type of thing. And it's important to note that you can add these things as to include an audience, but you can also use them to exclude an audience. So, for example, if you're doing an acquisition campaign to purely new customers, you may want to exclude people that have previously bought from you. So you could do that within, if you're importing your CRM data into Facebook, you could exclude existing customers. Similarly, if you wanted to grow your Facebook page, you could exclude your existing Facebook followers. Similarly, you could do the same thing with Instagram as well. So those are the different targeting options. I'll show the example again just to give you a sort of sense of how that might look. So in this example with Angelique, her location is Luxembourg. I've kind of put it in quite a broad age range because it's a profile, so people are going to be either end of this age band. Gender's female. Languages, because she's from Luxembourg, all three of these languages are test them out against each other. So you could do that in ad set level and see which ones bring you the best returns. Behaviors in this instance, we want to target people that are not connected to the brand's Facebook page or their app users, as it's an app brand, this example. And in this case, we're also going to exclude fast fashion because she's not into fast fashion at all. She's into more sustainable fashion and kind of classics and things like that. So that's the example. If you'd like to take another 5 minutes and kind of formulate your version of that, that'd be great. Is everyone okay if we give this 2 more minutes and then move ahead? Yeah. Were there any more questions around this, or was it fairly straightforward? So granted, you might need to know a little bit more about the ad platform to target those, but it's things like, is that person married? Are they engaged? Do they have children? There's a whole host of demographic areas you can target within Facebook. Does that answer your question? I think what we're trying to do for this exercise is just translate your pen portrait into some sort of demographic targeting. Okay, so I think, is everyone there now? Yeah. Going back to this example, when you input all these variables into the ad platform, you'll end up with something like this on the right-hand side. So you can see the area at the top, you can sort of see the age bands. And then in detailed targeting, you'll have all these areas like demographics and interests as well. So the screenshot isn't the best because I've had to squeeze quite a bit of information in there to get the whole profile in there. But you can see a summary at the bottom. So when you get to this point at ad set level, what you'll be able to do is then save that audience for future use. So I'd definitely recommend doing that, and that will save you having to create it each time that you want to deploy a campaign. Any questions on that? Let's have a look. Yeah, I'll be emailing slides. Yeah. So now we're on to questions. There is a handout that I've got. I don't know whether I mentioned that up at the top, probably not. But that will go through the detail of how you set up your first ad campaign. I didn't think it was worth walking you through the whole process because I thought it would be very, very dull. Hopefully this was a bit more interactive and you've got something practical that you can now use to actually start your first campaign. So the handout, oh, there's the handout. Thanks, Alice. Feel free to download that and use that. I also put, are you going to send the slides around as well, Alice, or should I put a link for that in? So are there any questions generally or anything specific? I have copied and pasted some of the ones. Make them relatable as a piece of content as opposed to a piece of advertising. So what I'm thinking is the difference between a billboard poster that you might see walking down the street that's very loud and very shouty and very minimalist versus a nicely crafted image with a post that explains what your offering is about. Because the things that look more native to the platform tend to be treated that way by users. And it's not trying to hoodwink them or anything like that. It's just trying to present your brand in a similar way to the way they would consume content anyway. Could I talk about segments versus ideal customer profiles? So segments are usually used when you get a much larger user base. So I'm assuming because this is kind of tailored for SMEs that maybe you're not at that scale yet. But quite often, larger brands, when they get to a certain amount of scale, they have definable groups of customers within their customer base. And segmentation is a way that brands can hone that offering and make sure that they're communicating with different parts of their audience and their customers in the right way. So it's a way of tailoring their communications for a particular type of customer. Does that make sense? I've got another one here. Worried that being too specific, it would only target exactly the criteria, but prioritizes this and then filters down for those who aren't exact criteria met. Not quite sure what I mean there. One thing to bear in mind around targeting is that you can do ands, ors. So I'm afraid it's a little bit technical, but it comes down to whether you're placing these criteria on top of each other. So they have to be in, let's say, Luxembourg and be a yoga teacher, for example, or it's an or. So in some cases, you might want that to be an or. In other cases, you might want to narrow down your targeting. And the only way to do that is to work it out within the platform. So as you're inputting these criteria, on the right-hand side, what you'll see is your audience pool either getting bigger or smaller, depending on how you input those. So it is a kind of personal choice, really. And I think my advice would be to start small and to start with your best guesses. So that's why we kind of talked about an ideal customer profile as opposed to broader targeting a wider audience. I think it's always better to start small and build your competency with the people that you know will buy your brand, as opposed to trying to bring in new types of customer that maybe you haven't seen before. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay, so what is retargeting in Facebook? So retargeting, you can do pretty much on all the ad platforms now. And it's a way of re-engaging people that you've had some sort of contact with before. So you may want to retarget people, say, that have signed up for your newsletter, but you've not heard from them for a while. You may want to retarget people that have been to your website and you've not heard from for a while. And the way you can do that is by implementing tracking or uploading your CRM database into Facebook. And they also have quite an extensive integrations kind of set up now. All that information is in the handout. So when you get to that part, hopefully you'll see retargeting options in the handout. how can you see stats? What do you look for to see how your ad performed? That's an interesting one. The stats are in the platform. Broadly speaking, it works the same way as the campaign setup. So at the top you have campaign level, then you have ad set level, then you have ad level underneath that. And when you set up a campaign, you can see stats at all of those levels. So what I quite often advise people to do is to set up multiple ad sets, so you can target different types of audiences and test out audiences that way. And then you would look at those stats to understand which of those audiences is actually driving a response in terms of your conversion. And then at ad level, I would always recommend doing at least 3 ads per ad set. And that will give you a bigger chance of connecting with consumers. I was going to try and do a sort of messaging exercise as part of this, but unfortunately it's not really possible in the time that we've got to get through all of that information. But if you do want more information about messaging and how to set up messaging and how you test out messaging, then you can always book sessions with people who have got Facebook experience on the Digital Boost platform. Should you link an ad straight to your website or a landing page for lead generation? I would also say for lead generation, you want a specific landing page that is designed to capture leads. And going back to what I was saying before about driving users off platform, Facebook and a lot of the other providers now have a lead generation capture form ad format. So you don't necessarily have to drive users off platform to capture leads. The advantage of that is that for a user, there's less friction, so they don't have to go off-site to do it. And it also uses the information from their profile to pre-populate that lead generation ad. So they don't have to type in all the information, it just appears and they hit submit. And obviously the benefit for Facebook, Meta, and the rest of the platforms is they don't have users going off-site to complete forms. Yes, thanks. Any follow-up resources that you'd suggest that takes you through the granular steps? So the handbook gives you the granular steps of how to set up campaigns, so hopefully that's covered. If you want to learn more about Facebook advertising in general, I would suggest that you sign up for Blueprint. And I think it's just undergoing a rebrand at the moment. I think it's going from Facebook Blueprint to Meta Blueprint, so you might have to do a bit of Googling to find it. But there's something in the region of, I think there's about 20 odd courses on there, all around for creators and advertisers how to best operate on their platform. And it will cover everything from measurement to setting up retargeting audiences, that type of thing. So it's an extensive resource. As a beginner, an SME, what is your guideline for cost? How much long do you spend before you know an ad is working or not? It's a difficult one. I think as a rough rule, you can set up campaigns that spend from £1 a day right the way up to hundreds of thousands a day, if you're really at that scale. So I think that's the advantage of Facebook, that there's always an audience there that you can reach. I think for an SME, I would look at what your product cost is and how much of that product cost you can afford to spend in acquiring a new customer. And that's called your cost per acquisition, or CPA. And define that first before you start deploying campaigns, because if you know you've got 30% margin on your product and you're prepared to spend 20 of that, then that becomes your kind of guideline for cost, and you can set budgets and benchmarks around that. You mentioned it costs more to take more users out of Meta, so is directing them to your business page cheaper than versus your website? Yeah, broadly speaking, it will be. You'll probably be aware that Meta have got their own browser. So if users are on desktop and they click out, or on a mobile, actually, it delivers them not into like Chrome browser or Safari or what have you. It's still within their ecosystem, but it's still another point of friction for a user. So it will cost you more money. Got to go pick up the kids. good luck with that. How long should you keep run an ad before you keep it or kill it? I think you should really know, in most cases, assuming you've got other ads to run in the same ad set, you should really know between 24 and 48 hours whether something's performing. Sometimes you need to kind of add new ads to keep campaigns running. Other times you should have enough other ads to keep running that ad set.